Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Virtual Day Trip to Wine Country. It is 7 p.m. in NYC and 7 p.m. in Washingtonville, New York, in the beautiful Hudson Valley, and 65 miles northwest of Manhattan. I'm Sam Kimball from New York Wine Events. Thank you so much for joining us on Virtual Day Trip to Wine Country. We are here for a tasting flight of 4 wines with one of New York State's most storied and acclaimed wineries, and that is Brotherhood Winery. It's also America's oldest winery, so we're in for a really interesting session. That's going to be really fun and great. Brotherhood is located in Orange County, New York, again, about 65 miles north and west of New York City, just west of the Hudson River. Let's take a look at actually where we are headed on the map. You can see on the map behind me here is a little red map pin. Just to my right, you'll see New York City at the bottom and about literally 65 miles northwest. So right there is Brotherhood Winery. And it's a historic part of the country. The Hudson Valley region is one of the 4 primary and major wine regions in New York State. It is also generally a very historic region dating back to well before the American Revolution. In terms of the Hudson Valley, anyone want to guess the number of wineries in the Hudson Valley? Hit us up in the chat in Zoom and let us know. And we'll also get our guest to weigh in on that. I think she's even more of a precise knowledge expert on that topic than I am. Phoebe says 8. No, but keep going. The valley stretches along the Hudson River all the way from Westchester County, just north of the city, up to Albany, the state capital of New York. We're getting close, guys. Myra says 20, Ellen says 30. I think we're zeroing in. We're getting very close. I think it's about 35, but I'm going to get our guest to weigh in on that with an exact number. And so the Hudson Valley is known for its vineyards, its orchards, its farms, and it has a wonderful and vibrant sustainable food movement. And it's a tremendous place. Some of you may know from previous broadcasts, I myself am from the Hudson Valley. I'm not biased. I'm from the other side of the river, the east side in Dutchess County. And so it is a wonderful, wonderful part of the country with a lot of history and a lot of culture. I want to welcome everyone, welcome one, welcome all. Please ask us any questions, hit us up with any comments in the chat in Zoom, and we will answer those questions and comments as we go on the fly, if you will, in real time during the session. Yes, Allison, I agree. The area is absolutely gorgeous. And also, if you guys would right now in the chat, hit us up with where you're located in the US. What part of the US are you tuning in from this evening? So this evening, we're going to travel virtually to Brotherhood Winery. As I mentioned, it's America's oldest winery dating back to 1839, and an amazing place. We're going to learn a lot more about it. Wow, we've got people from all over. We've got Pennsylvania, Long Island, Bronx, New York, originally from Dutchess County, New Jersey, a lot of East Coasters. Sonoma, Napa, California, love that. Hey, Steve. Yeah, we've got a varied group from all over creation. A lot of New York in the house. Love that. Jersey City. Hey, Dana. All right, so let's take a look. We have a fun and very informative video piece that I'd love to share with you guys. California, another Californian. And let's take a look at this. This is about a 2-minute, really nice overview all about Brotherhood Winery. So bear with me. We'll take a look at that right now. Bear with me 1 second, and we'll get that going. Brotherhood overview video. Here we go. All right.
175 years old, but there is nothing outdated about the Brotherhood Winery in Orange County. With its eclectic array of wines, Brotherhood prides itself on serving the ever-changing palates of its customers.
Taste is really what rules. What we try to do is provide a variety of wines to meet a variety of tastes.
Tucked away in the village of Washingtonville, Brotherhood Winery serves hundreds of thousands of tourists each year. Whether it's their dry Riesling, holiday spice wine, or their port, Brotherhood has a wine for everyone. Selling anywhere between 60 and 80,000 cases each year, it's no wonder why folks from all over, not just the Hudson Valley, but New York State, choose to visit.
Or from the north part of New Jersey, Connecticut, and New York State as well. So over 100,000 people last year.
The winery is considered America's oldest consecutive producer of wine. That's because throughout the 13 years of Prohibition, Brotherhood stayed open to provide communion wine to churches, something they still do till this very day. Founded in 1839, the winery has gone through 6 owners over the course of its tumultuous history. Having survived 2 world wars and depressions, owners were forced to sell their land in order to stay afloat. This is why Brotherhood doesn't have a vineyard on premises and instead sources their grapes from all over New York State, including Long Island and the Finger Lakes. Its location has its benefits depending on your taste.
Being that it is a cooler climate, our colder weather is very conducive to Cabernet Sauvignon, to Chardonnay, to Riesling.
Once fermented, the wine is stored and aged in oak barrels close to 15 feet below ground, after which it's time to enjoy, either at home or in the winery's tasting room.
It's a great summertime wine.
It's a region and state poised to become the new Napa Valley.
Hudson Valley, for example, there are 14 wineries just in our little Schwandunk wine trail alone. Then the Finger Lakes has expanded tremendously. So we have been developing our own viticultural areas.
For Explore New York, I'm Bridget Sayage.
All right. Well, that is a quick overview, guys, of
the most screwed up recipes
hold on one second.
the cocktails across the world.
So that's a quick overview of Brotherhood. Really, really interesting. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our guests this evening. She is amazing and is a veteran of Brotherhood Winery. And is actually born and raised as a native daughter of the area. So Renee Schweizer, the marketing manager at Brotherhood. Welcome, Renee. It's so great having you with us this evening.
Hi, Sam. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here and talking about some New York wine tonight.
Absolutely. Now tell us, where does this broadcast find you?
Sure. So I'm actually at the winery. I am in our Grand Monarch Hall, which is one of the oldest buildings on the property, and it's often used as an event location. We have a lot of weddings in here, which turn out really, really beautiful. So I thought this would be a good spot to check in tonight.
I mean, and we'll show some of the photography. You can see it in my background. The building and the history it's just oozing with so much background and history on the winery, and so many beautiful images. As the oldest winery in America, what's the culture? What are the sort of the highlights of the culture and the history of Brotherhood that people should know about?
Yeah, so if we look a little bit about the culture of Brotherhood, we really have 2 basic platforms that we go off. One is our long-standing history, of course, and then the second one is what we're doing today and really fostering an environment of growth and innovation to be able to make top quality wines and be a business that is conducive to wineries and our consumers today. So if we our history is our foundation, right? We're America's oldest winery, founded in 1839. That makes us 182 years old. So we have a lot of history to go back on. And if we take a look at all the different generations of owners who have come through Brotherhood and how Brotherhood has excelled over the years, you really get this common theme of innovation and what all these different owners did during their own time to make Brotherhood special, make Brotherhood stick around. And we've been through Prohibition, we've been through 2 world wars, we've been through recessions, and we're still here to this day. So we definitely take our history seriously. We started off, the founder of Brotherhood Winery was a man called John Jakes, and he started off as a shoemaker, and he planted the first grapevines in the Hudson Valley, and the rest is history. We started off really back in the 1830s. Wine was used for sacramental purposes or medicinal purposes. So that's
Let me ask you a quick question. So these images that we're seeing of the building here, like this part of the facility goes back, does it go back before 1839?
So the building that I am in, the Grand Monarch Hall, this stone building was actually put up more in the later 1800s, and it actually we had a really bad fire here in 1999, and it took down the whole ceiling. It took down some of the walls. The 2 main walls, they stayed remaining, so we were able to rebuild around that. And actually the wood beams that you can see behind me and are actually in the image, those were original to the building and the foundation, and miraculously they survived.
So these beams we're looking at right now survived that major fire in the early 1990s.
Yeah, so these are beams from the mid-late 1800s.
I mean, it's the photos themselves. It looks like there's 1,000 stories in each photo, you know.
There really are. There's a lot of things. What we're looking at right now, this photo, this one, it was used as the private cellaring area for the owners of the winery. So that was kind of their private stash and aging the wines in that area.
Yes, and kept under lock and key, I see here.
Yeah, we don't put too many new vintages in there now, but for a while we were still tasting wines that were in that vault. I mean, they've gone bad now.
A lot of them probably didn't make it until today.
Yeah.
But and then what I was fascinated, because there's a really interesting image that you sent me of the old days when, if you look here, this must be from somewhere in the 19th century, and you see like the vineyard being managed and farmed with oxen on the right hand side there, pulling, I guess, a plow or a wagon. And all these workers, you know, manually. And then it was interesting. There's a stagecoach on the left, I guess, taking the noble women and noblemen to church or something that day. But really interesting.
Yeah, the whole Washingtonville, where we're located, a lot of this was all farmland, and it was vineyards. We had a lot of vines planted on this property, this area, but over the years and over the generations that got sold off, we've been a large grape purchaser basically since the early 1900s. So the vines didn't last super long in Washingtonville, but we certainly spent many years growing our own vines here.
And speaking of history, you have on site, because you do have close to 100,000 people a year who come through Brotherhood Winery. You actually have sort of a museum in the cellar here with a lot of infographics and great information about the history.
Yeah, we're really excited. I mean, with COVID, we had to close tours for a while, which was really sad for us because we love that our underground cellars, they're still fully operational. We cellar our wines down there still, and we converted portions of the cellars into basically a museum for people to walk through and explore. That basically has its roots back into the 1960s. America's oldest winery was the birth of wine tourism. The family who owned it at the time, the Farrells, wanting to educate people about wine, they opened the cellars, offered free tours and tastings, which basically turned into big wine parties down in the cellars. A lot of people still to this day remember coming here as kids with their parents. Some parents still remember coming here, and they had people fill out postcards that they had to mail to their friends, family. So the next weekend, more and more people would keep coming and visiting the winery. So that's the start of wine tourism for you.
Super interesting. And as far as the history goes, I believe, if this is correct, there's only been 4 owners in 100. It's really more like 180 plus years that it's been open.
Yeah. So when you look at it, we started off with the Jacks family, which then when all their
John Jacks in the 19th century. Yep.
Then we moved on to the Emerson family, who had it for quite a while. And they, right about after Prohibition, is when they sold it to the Farrell family, who had it up until the 80s. And then we moved into our newer generations of owners.
The current owners. And which was this, at what point was it which owner sold it to actually their distributors who were based in Manhattan, in New York City?
That was the original family, the Jacks. They sold it to the Emerson family, who were wine distributors in New York. Yeah. Yeah.
So interesting. Steve made an interesting comment in the chat. Tell everybody, why you are the most, not only the oldest, but the continuously operating, because in the Prohibition, what happened in the Prohibition?
Sure. So in Prohibition, we were able to fall back on our roots, which was producing sacramental wine. We had never really stopped producing sacramental wine, but it kind of had taken a back seat at that point. And once the threat of Prohibition was coming, we got basically the rights to produce sacramental wines. And during Prohibition, we supplied about 70% of the clergy of the New York Archdiocese with their sacramental wines.
So it's a smart move. You got back into church wine just when booze was illegal during Prohibition.
Yeah, during Prohibition, we were actually sitting on over 500,000 bottles of wine in the cellars that could not be touched legally. So after Prohibition, it turned out to be a positive thing for us too, because our wines had been aging for so long. It brought a lot of attention.
So when we were looking at those shots of the cellar, and you were talking about the wine parties going back to, 30, 40, 50 years ago, a couple of people, Ellen and Allison, both made mention of memories going back, or friends or relatives going to those wine parties in the cellar.
Right. Yeah, it's really fun. It's really fun to hear those.
No, it's great. It's really great. So now we've talked about the history, right? America's oldest winery, so much in that history and through the 4 ownership regimes that have been there. What is the winery all about today? And as I like to ask, what's the calling card today in terms of the wines and the wine styles and the portfolio of selections of Brotherhood Winery today?
Sure. So yeah, history gives you great tradition. It gives you amazing pedigree, but it's not everything, right? You have to produce great wines for the consumers of today. So really within the last 10 to 15 years, Brotherhood has been really committed to being a modern day winery. A lot of investments have been made to produce quality wines. And that's the main goal. So first you need good grapes, right? So we are one of the largest New York grape purchasers. We source mostly from the Finger Lakes and the North Fork of Long Island to go from really great viticultural areas within the state. Right. And then you need good equipment. So investing in state-of-the-art presses and filtration systems. We have a capacity at Brotherhood to bottle about 1 million cases per year. And right now we're operating about 65 to 70% of that capacity. And that brings us into Brotherhood being a really multifaceted business. So, of course, the most obvious, we're a winery. We produce mainly New York wines, which we're super proud of. But we also offer contract packaging and private label services. So other businesses, other wineries, we can produce their wines, bottle their wines for them, basically any stage of the process.
Right. So so-called custom crush production.
Yeah, basically.
Yep. That's the industry term.
And then we're big on the export market. So we export our wines into Asia, into other parts of Europe as well, and have been doing that for many, many years now. Something newer for us is we've always kind of imported wines from other countries before, but in the last year and a half, we've gotten really serious. We started Vinecrest Co., which is our import division branch. So we're bringing in wines from South Africa, South America,
Wow.
France, Italy, and they're brands that have amazing backstories, which we're putting into the US market, which is super awesome for us. And then we maintain ourselves as a tourist and an event venue, which is a great part of being a brick and mortar.
Absolutely. And before we get started with tasting some wines, I have a couple other questions, but one very basic question is, now with the reopening happening, with starting to come out of the pandemic,
Yeah.
What's the status of visitors and being able to come to the winery, do the tour, hang out there, the tasting room, etc.?
Yeah. So of course, it's not operating exactly as it used to be. If you've ever come here for a tour and tasting, everything is up to date with COVID guidelines and everything that's constantly changing. So the exciting news is we are doing tastings. They're socially distanced. Now that we're getting into the summer months, when we can do them outside, they're being done outside. So we are open right now Wednesdays through Sundays to come do tastings. We do recommend reservations at this time, which you can make online. And we are offering private tours of the cellars, and that's so we keep groups nice and small, going through the cellars with the tour guide, so you're still getting a nice tour, but those definitely need a reservation, which you can make online.
Right. Great.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, let's talk sparkling.
Great.
I love a great sparkling wine, and I think one of the best kept secrets about New York State wines is that there's some really terrific sparkling wines that are made by New York State wine producers.
Absolutely.
And not least of which is some extraordinary selections from Brotherhood. Tell us a little bit about sparkling wine at Brotherhood, what's on offer, and then I think that's a great way for us to segue into start tasting the 4 selections. But tell us a little bit about sparkling at Brotherhood.
Yeah, so we have a pretty long history with sparkling wines, champagnes. Right before Prohibition hit, the family had invested a lot of money to make champagnes, and then we were sitting on a ton of champagne during Prohibition. So at Brotherhood, we make a few different types of sparkling wine. Our Grand Monarch does use the original Champenois method, which is where it's fermented in the bottle. Our winemakers and team are turning the bottles to get that really nice organic bubbles. A lot of our wines also use the Charmat or transfer method, and that's actually, we'll get to taste that and talk a little bit about it with our Be Sparkling Rosé. But that's when there's a second fermentation process that happens. It's a big stainless steel tank. And essentially there's so much pressure in that tank that it forms natural bubbles. And the wine is then bottled from that tank and corked, so it keeps those nice smooth bubbles in there. So that's the main type of sparkling wines you're gonna find here at Brotherhood.
And you do that in the Charmat method as opposed to the method Champenoise, which is sort of the traditional French champagne method.
Yes.
Yeah, excellent. Well, let's jump into it. So what wines are we tasting today? I think we're starting with, speaking of sparkling, the Be Sparkling Rosé. That's the name of the first wine. Letter B.
Yes.
Sparkling Rosé.
Yes, Be Sparkling Rosé. So like I said, this wine, it uses the Charmat method. It's a blend of 90% Chardonnay and 10% Pinot Noir. So the Pinot Noir is what gives it that really nice pink color to it. It's from 100% Finger Lakes grapes. And if you're tasting along, if you smell it, immediately you're going to get hit with a really nice scent of strawberries, and that comes from the characteristic of the Pinot Noir grape. But you're also going to get some raspberries with a nice creamy layer to the smell.
Mm-hmm. And this is made in the Charmat method of sparkling.
Yes, it is.
And it's all Pinot Noir grapes.
It's 90% Chardonnay with 10%.
Oh, sorry, 90% Chardonnay with 10% Pinot Noir.
Yeah. And then super juicy, fresh mineral taste with a really nice crisp finish. So it's a really tasty, easy to drink, fruity, sparkling wine. Rosé.
I see that Nancy is familiar with this selection, delicious and light. This is a wonderful sparkling wine. Has anybody else, just hit us in the chat if you have actually had sparkling wine from Brotherhood Winery, or if you're specifically familiar with this one. Hit us up in the chat. And this one is, I mean, it's really accessibly priced. I mean, $14.99 is just super economic and accessible for any occasion, which is great. And I think that that's one of the things I really like about Brotherhood is you have a real range of accessibly priced selections all the way up through reserve selections.
Yeah, we do. We have a pretty big portfolio of wines, which we're real proud of.
So now, Renee, what's your favorite, if you were to pair something with this, food-wise, what's your favorite pairing for
This is a really safe and easy wine to pair with seafood, especially fried fishes. Any kind of fried dish is going to taste really nice with this because the bubbles help cut through the fried texture.
Cut through the oily characteristics of the fried food. Yeah.
Yeah. So really anything fried, spicy foods as well. It's a fun cheering wine at the start of your dinner as well.
Right. Well, and I would say with rosés in general, and certainly with sparkling wines in general, you don't need to have a food, that has to go with it. It can just be something that you enjoy before, kind of dinner. It can be the first thing you open for a fun evening. You could take it to the pool or the beach.
Absolutely. It's nice and refreshing. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I'm a cheese lover. Is there a cheese you would recommend with this Be Sparkling Rosé?
Honestly, really soft cheeses. Soft cheeses are going to really complement the creamy notes that you get with this wine.
I would go with like a goat cheese, maybe a really nice brie, or possibly like a Spanish Mahone is a wonderful cheese with a sparkling rosé.
I don't think you could go wrong.
Excellent. All right. Well, let's go on to the second selection.
Sure.
And I will remind everybody, we always try to drop a little bit of useful wine knowledge on our friends and colleagues. So the next one is a Riesling, and it's not the official, there is no official wine grape in the state of New York, but the unofficial wine grape of the state of New York is Riesling. Definitely. And for those of you, many of you are already well aware of this, but if you don't know, New York State makes Rieslings that compete head to head in international wine competitions with the best Rieslings from Germany and from Alsace, which is the region in France that does great Riesling. And there are many times where the New York State Rieslings win those competitions.
Very true.
So no pressure, Renee. Here with the Brotherhood New York Premium Selection Riesling, which, by the way, talk about accessibly priced, is $12.99. Amazing. And that's before the promo code discount.
Yeah. So like you were saying, it's, Riesling is such a popular grape in New York State. It's no surprise. So it also comes no surprise that this is our best-selling wine. It's our New York Premium Selection Riesling, also affectionately known as the Blue Bottle Riesling. Bestseller. It's also our bestseller on the international market as well. So Riesling, it's a hit. This wine, it's nice and young, it's fresh, it doesn't go really through any aging process. It is, once it's finished in stainless steel tanks, we bottle it, and that helps keep its fruity, its fresh, and its crisp nature. Nice fruit, floral notes, you'll get pear, you'll get apple.
So this is a dry Riesling, Renee.
So this is technically a semi-dry Riesling.
It's a semi-dry Riesling, so it's got some sweetness to it.
Yeah, so on the Riesling scale, on the Riesling sweetness scale, it's basically right in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes this wine really approachable. If you're a sweet wine drinker, if you're a dry wine drinker, it's an easy wine to drink and to enjoy.
All right, Renee, check your inventory on the Riesling. Phoebe says this is her absolute favorite is the Riesling. So, tell the shipping dock to get ready to ship out a bunch.
We are, don't worry. We're always stocked up on this stuff, and it comes in a 1.5 liter bottle too.
Excellent. Great question from Scott. How does the winery provide such valuable tasting wines at such reasonable prices?
Yeah, so I think the best way to answer that probably goes back to our partnerships with our grape producers. These are long-standing partnerships. We're not a passive grape buyer. We have long contracts that come into play when we're sourcing our grapes. So I think that really helps us to be able in the long run to provide wines that are accessibly priced and good quality for the prices that they are.
Yeah, and also you are an established commercial winery. You're
Yes.
not a mom and pop farm winery.
Very true.
You have a major facility and
Yes.
the ability to produce great wine, but in good strong quantity as well.
Yes, absolutely. Very true.
What I love about Brotherhood is it's sort of in that middle market where you're compared to a huge California or European or New World producer from Australia. You're middle ground in terms of size and dimension. But what that means to me, and some people have heard me talk about this, one of my pet peeves is when you get up to big volume, millions of cases, you're talking about factory made products.
Absolutely.
Just not the same. And you still have, at Brotherhood, you still have the quality of artisan wine made effectively by hand, but you make enough of it that, one of the problems with farm wineries, which we love, and small, really craft wineries, is that, you might love the rosé. They'll, at some point during the season, they may run out of the rosé.
Yeah. That's a really, it's a really good point. We have a really large capacity, but a lot of that capacity goes to wines that we bottle or make for other people. And it's not necessarily the wines that we're making with the Brotherhood brand.
Right. Exactly. Excellent. Well, the Riesling, you do New York State proud with that Riesling, and you cannot, for anyone who's not familiar with Brotherhood or with New York State Rieslings, you cannot go wrong with this Riesling. This is a great selection. All right, let's move on to wine number 3, which is the Cabernet Sauvignon, the New York Premium Selection Cab Sauv. Also very accessibly priced, $16.99. Tell us a little bit about the origins and how you guys came to make this wine.
Sure. So the most exciting part that I'm excited to share about this wine is that it recently won the best Cabernet Sauvignon at the New York Wine Competition, which is one of the biggest wine competitions in New York. So we are super, super proud of our winemaker and of this wine. We've already known, in the winery ourselves that it's a great New York cab, but to have the acclaim, we're really happy about it. The best way to describe this Cabernet is it is an old world style Cabernet. So it's more comparable to Cabernet Sauvignons that are going to come out of Europe than Cabernets that are going to come out of California. And that's because of the climate that we're in. So 100% of these grapes come from our Cabernet Sauvignon, excuse me, and they come from the North Fork of Long Island, which is a really great growing area for Cab Sauvs. And what we also do for this wine is we hot ferment it for a really short period of time, like 10 days. And what this does is it helps extract from the grapes the best flavor, aroma, and color for the wine as well.
Did you say you hot ferment it? H-O-T?
Yes, H-O-T.
What is that? I mean, none of us, including me, know the ins and outs of wine production, but what is hot fermenting?
Yeah, so Cabernet Sauvignon grapes, they do really well in sunny and warm climate. That's how
It's a warm climate grape for sure.
Yeah. So to help that even more when they're fermenting in the stainless steel tanks, those tanks are really regulated with their temperature controls. So we let it, instead of being colder, we let it get warm, essentially. So the wine itself, the juice that's being pressed is being kept warm, and that helps get the best characteristics out of the grapes. And then after it comes out of that tank, it's put into 90% American oak barrels. And this wine is barrel aged for about a year.
So it's American oak, not French oak.
Yes.
What's the alcohol percentage in this wine?
This is 13%.
13. So compared to a California Cab, it's lighter on the composition of alcohol.
Yeah. So the next wine that we will taste is actually a California Cab. It's grapes we get from California. So we'll be able to talk a little bit about that distinction. But definitely New York Cabs, they're going to be softer and they're going to be fruitier.
And they're going to be lighter. I mean, New York is a cool climate,
right,
compared to California, which is a warm climate. Remember, for anybody watching, in Napa Valley, the temperatures in the summertime in peak of grape growing season, they're often 100 degrees in Napa Valley. And that's good for Cabernet Sauvignon grapes. Love that. And then they love the fact that it's not far from the ocean. They get the ocean air that cools them down. The grapes recover at night. But that's a warm climate for grape growing and wine growing. And at the end of the day, you get that, as Steve just put in the chat, the California fruit bomb. You get the jammy, delicious red fruit, black fruit Cabernet Sauvignon. Very different than a New York State grown Cabernet Sauvignon where you get the cool climate. To your point. Steve's got an interesting question. Since you do buy your grapes and you source mainly from other places, other producers, whether it be vineyards in the Finger Lakes or the North Fork of Long Island or California, do you have any sort of controls or procedures that under your contracts with the grape growers you require and that you put in place as part of those contracts?
Absolutely. We have employees who are specifically going to these vineyards, and they're invested in the whole entire process of where the grapes we're taking from the plot, when they're harvested, collected. It's a totally integrated process in these partnerships that we have, which is really great.
It's super interesting. I mean, and that's not unlike some of the really really smart, really capable California producers and even producers in France who have contracts and relationships with vineyards and grape growers, where those vineyards and grape growers, all they do is grow grapes and they provide them to their contractual partners. And it makes a lot of sense. And it's a great question, Steve. You guys have an input on how they're farming, when they're harvesting, because that's going to have a material impact on the wine that gets made.
Absolutely. To make good wine, you need to start with grapefruit. So
now on this New York State Cabernet Sauvignon, the New York Premium Selection Cab Sauv, $16.99. What's the occasion that you drink this wine on, Renee? And what are the foods that you recommend?
Yeah. So I think this is really, if you're a Cabernet Sauvignon drinker, I think it's an anytime wine. Anytime that you feel like a nice red wine, it's medium bodied. So like we were saying, it's not going to be a super heavy wine. It's a really nice dinner wine. If you're, especially, I mean, Cabernet Sauvignons, they're great with red meat, right? So any type of steak, roast beef, if you're having a ragu sauce, this would be a great pair with that. Also, dessert, if you're eating something with dark chocolate, this is going to taste delicious.
It's a good pairing. Now, is it light enough to go with turkey? Could you serve it at Thanksgiving?
It wouldn't be my first pick with turkey. I would probably go more with a Pinot Noir.
I was going to say Pinot Noir is that classic.
Yeah, classic. But I don't think it would be bad either, certainly.
Yeah. Excellent. All right, let's go to wine number 4. Sure. Which is the 1839 Cabernet Sauvignon, which of course references the year that Brotherhood was established.
Yeah. So this wine, the first vintage, was actually made to celebrate our 175th anniversary as a winery. And it has just become really popular. It has a great showing. So we're now on our 3rd vintage. Like I mentioned before, we actually source our grapes for this wine from California. This vintage that we're drinking tonight is from Paso Robles. And the first question is maybe, why do a California wine when you're a New York winery? And that goes back to our history. So basically, right when California was being incorporated as part of America, Brotherhood had one of the first commercially established wineries and owned vineyards in California. We actually owned that land, which was north of San Francisco and Livermore. Those vines and that vineyard is now owned by the Wente family because around the Prohibition time is when we had to make the decision to sell the California land that we had. So we wanted to pay a little homage to our California roots for our anniversary wine and decided to go with a California cab. And basically throughout the whole process of making these wines, we kind of rent a winery. So our winemaker is working remotely and also working with the vineyard that we're sourcing from, with their winemaker, with all the decisions, again, of what grapes, when they're harvested, and the beginning process of making this wine. And then once the wine is finished, it is sent to us and we barrel age it here at Brotherhood Winery. So this Cabernet is also put in American oak barrels, and we age this for 18 months to 2 years.
In barrels. And then after you bottle it, do you bottle age it further before you sell it?
We let it rest for a little while. Our winemaker, it really depends on the vintage because he's constantly tasting and he lets us know when it's ready to release.
Excellent. And what's the occasion and what's a food that you recommend for this wine?
So this is a really nice, when you have somewhere nice to go is when I would say this is a great wine.
So this is sort of a special occasion wine.
It is sort of a special occasion wine. This is definitely within Brotherhood. This is definitely one of our top expensive wines at $44.99. So it's one of our higher wines. So if you're going for a holiday party, super nice wine to bring and show.
Right. It's going in the direction of a special occasion wine. Does the price reflect the cost of grapes in California or winemaking in California versus the lower cost of same in New York?
Well, there's certainly a different cost in transportation. I mean, for our New York premium cab, these are coming from Long Island, and for these grapes, they're coming all the way from California. So you definitely have the transport cost that goes into it. Yep. But also it's a higher quality wine, so it's made differently. It's aged longer. So all of those factors go into it. Even the packaging from a marketing standpoint. These are beautifully
You have
waxed.
is it-
They're
does
all
it have the
waxed by
wax?
hand.
Does it have the wax top over the cork?
Yeah, yes.
It does,
And these
yeah.
are all waxed by hand. So a lot of energy goes into making these bottles.
I have a dumb wine enthusiast question, which is,
Sure.
what's the recommended method for opening that bottle? Because the top, for those of you watching, Renee's explaining that the top has, many of you know this, has a wax over the cork. So it's
Yeah.
not like the foil that you cut and then pull the top of the foil off.
Yeah, that's
So I want to know the professional way to take that cork out and open that bottle.
Yeah, so we actually, and I'm blanking on the name of the wax that we use, but it's a certain type of wax that makes it basically easier to crack. So what you want to do, you just want to put the cork straight in and open it. No need
Put the
to cut
corkscrew like
around.
right through it. You just
right
act as
through
if
it
the
and it
wax isn't
pops
even
off.
there.
Yep, and
Yeah.
it pops right off.
Yeah. All right. That's good advice.
Uh-huh.
Allison says, do you heat it and then corkscrew straight down? No need to heat it. Just put the corkscrew through the top of that wax and start turning it down.
Yep, you'll get it off. And I see a question. The alcohol percentage on this is 13.5%.
So this is a little more elevated. It's still relatively light for a California Cabernet.
Yeah, it's definitely heavier. You definitely have those jammier characteristics of this wine. It's bigger than New York Cabs. On the nose, you're getting black cherry, you're getting vanilla, and also these oak tinge spices from the barrel.
Yeah, this is a flavor bomb, in terms of the bouquet, the aroma, the taste profile.
Yeah, even in the mouth, it's more complex. There's more flavors that are incorporated together. You still have fruitiness to it, but you gain a little bit more richness. So you can taste black currant, plum notes in here a lot.
Yeah, not to get too wine geeky, but if anybody's curious, this kind of a wine from a warm climate like California, the grapes are left on the vines longer. They ripen and mature longer on the vines. They get bigger, they get juicier, they have more water. They develop more residual sugar in the fruit itself. All of that, then when the grape is crushed and the juice is fermented, that makes for a bigger, more structured, bolder, like big flavored wine. It's a difference between a warm climate red wine and a cool climate red wine. And that, if you ever really dive into the minutia of wine, cool climate versus warm climate it's almost like, northern hemisphere, southern hemisphere. There's a big difference between these things, and the wines have characteristics that reflect that. So, so Steve is right. Lake County, where these grapes are from, is very warm and hot, and the grapes ripen, and the sugar in the grapes is higher. And that's what made, I fell in love with wine when I discovered California Zinfandel, when I discovered Chateauneuf du Pape from France, which is, in a warmer part of the country. And you get that warm climate, huge, big, bold red wine flavor characteristics and aromatics. Nothing wrong with a cool climate red, but very different in characteristics.
Yeah, we're really proud to be able to represent both. As an American winery, as America's oldest winery, like I said, we're super proud of our New York Cab. We love it. It's a great wine to drink, but it's also super exciting to explore what other areas of the country have for us too, and especially when we have historic ties to it. So we're really proud of both of these wines, and there's a time and place for both.
Excellent. At White Cliff Winery, it's beautiful there, and we'll find out about some more awesome Hudson Valley selections. Thanks everybody. Thanks Renee. Stay safe, and we'll see you soon. We're going to see you there. We're going to come do the tour at Brotherhood.
Yes, come visit us. We'd love to have you all. This was great. Thank you so much, Sam.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great evening.
Good night.
Good night.